4 Washington quarters, all looking like ordinary pocket change, are hiding secrets worth up to $35,000. From rare mint errors to doubled dies that went unnoticed for decades, these coins have quietly become some of the most sought-after discoveries in American numismatics. Let's find out which ones could be sitting in your change right now. First coin. The United States 1985 P Mintmark Washington quarter dollar coin is one of those quietly extraordinary pieces of American numismatic history that most people have walked past 1,000 times without ever realizing what they were leaving behind. Minted at the Philadelphia facility during a year when over 500 million quarters were struck for circulation, this coin carries the very first P mint mark ever placed on a circulating Washington quarter, a subtle but deeply significant shift in United States mint policy that began in 1980 and continued through this pivotal mid-decade production run. The obverse presents John Flanagan's enduring portrait of George Washington, facing left with a dignified and resolute expression, while the reverse displays the perched eagle clutching a cluster of arrows beneath an elegant wreath, a design rooted in early 20th century patriotic symbolism. What makes the 1985 P so fascinating is not that it was rare in the traditional sense, because millions entered everyday commerce, but rather that finding one in truly pristine, uncirculated condition with full strike detail, blazing original luster, and no distracting contact marks has become an increasingly difficult challenge as decades pass and the vast majority of these coins were spent, scratched, tarnished, and ultimately destroyed in the ordinary friction of daily American life. To understand why collectors have grown so captivated by this specific issue, you have to picture the landscape of American coinage in the mid-1980s, a period when the mint was pushing enormous volumes of coinage through high-speed presses to satisfy commercial demand from vending machines, retail banks, and a rapidly expanding economy. The Philadelphia Mint was working at extraordinary capacity, and quality control sometimes fluctuated under that pressure, which meant that while most 1985 P quarters were adequately struck, a small fraction emerged with remarkably sharp detail, full feather definition on the eagle's breast, crisp lettering on the obverse, and a nearly flawless surface that set them apart from the millions of ordinary examples surrounding them. The clad composition of this coin, consisting of a pure copper core sandwiched between 2 layers of cupronickel, gives it a distinctive silvery white appearance with subtle warm undertones when preserved in original condition, and the weight should register at exactly 5.67 grams with a diameter of 24.3 millimeters, specifications that every serious collector must verify before considering any purchase, because even slight deviations can signal an altered, counterfeit, or error specimen that changes the entire identity and value of the coin. The visual appeal of a truly exceptional 1985 P Washington quarter is something that photographs rarely capture fully, because the interplay of cartwheel luster across the fields, the frosty texture of the devices, and the razor-sharp separation between raised and recessed elements creates a three-dimensional quality that can only be appreciated in hand under proper lighting. When you rotate a pristine example under a single light source, the luster should rotate smoothly and continuously across both obverse and reverse, with no breaks, no dull patches, and no evidence of cleaning that so many unfortunate specimens have suffered at the hands of well-meaning but uninformed owners who polished their coins thinking they were improving them. The rim should be uniform and fully formed, with no clipped areas, no weak edges, and no signs of being struck on an incomplete planchet, all of which are critical factors that separate a common circulated piece from something far more significant and valuable. Collectors also look closely at the strike alignment, checking that the obverse and reverse designs are properly oriented relative to each other, since any rotational misalignment, even a minor one, can indicate a striking error that dramatically increases collector interest and potential market value. Among the most sought-after variations of the 1985 P quarter are examples showing letter doubling, particularly on the inscriptions "In God We Trust," "Liberty," or the date itself, where a subtle ghosting or split serif appearance can reveal that the working hub or working die shifted slightly during the die creation process at the Philadelphia facility. These doubled die varieties, while not as dramatic as some of the famous errors from earlier decades, are nonetheless genuinely collectible and have generated increasing excitement among variety specialists who meticulously examine thousands of coins searching for that telltale secondary image that confirms a true doubled die rather than mere mechanical doubling or die deterioration. Other notable anomalies include off-center strikes, where the planchet was not perfectly centered between the dies, and the design appears shifted to one side with a crescent of blank planchet visible, as well as broad strike errors, where the coin was struck without the retaining collar and expanded beyond its normal diameter, and even rare instances of coins struck on the wrong planchet, such as a quarter design appearing on a dime-sized blank, which represents one of the most dramatic and valuable error types imaginable for this series. Every one of these anomalies transforms an otherwise ordinary quarter into something that commands intense scrutiny and passionate bidding from the error coin community. As you move deeper into the world of the 1985 P Washington quarter, the emotional dimension of collecting becomes impossible to ignore, because these coins represent a tangible connection to a specific moment in American history, a time when Ronald Reagan was beginning his second term, the space shuttle program was reaching its zenith, and the country was navigating the final years of the Cold War with a mixture of anxiety and optimism that defined the era. Holding a pristine 1985 P quarter in your hand is like holding a small silver time capsule from that world. And for many collectors, the thrill is not merely financial but deeply personal, tied to memories of childhood coin collections, of quarters received as change at a grocery store or found in a grandparent's jar of saved coins, and of the sudden electric realization that something ordinary might actually be extraordinary. That emotional resonance is precisely what drives the market for these coins beyond mere scarcity statistics. Because when a collector gazes through a loupe at a perfectly preserved 1985 P and sees the original mint luster gleaming back as brightly as it did the day it was struck over 4 decades ago, the experience transcends commerce and becomes something closer to reverence for a small piece of the American story that somehow survived against all odds. When the conversation turns to value, the 1985 P Washington quarter reveals a surprisingly wide and dramatic range that depends almost entirely on condition, strike quality, and the presence or absence of any mint error or variety, and the figures that follow represent documented collector and auction outcomes where applicable, though they are never guaranteed, and the market remains fluid and unpredictable. At the entry level of significant collector interest, minor variations and attractive uncirculated examples with above-average eye appeal have realized between $2,500 and $3,500 in specialized transactions, which is already an astonishing return for a coin that most Americans would casually spend without a second thought. And that range alone represents the kind of unexpected financial windfall that could cover a month's salary or fund a dream vacation for someone who simply had the curiosity to look closely at their pocket change. Moving upward, high-grade examples certified by major grading services at the upper tiers of the mint state scale have reached approximately $5,000 in competitive auction settings, a figure that begins to feel less like a coin price and more like a meaningful contribution toward a home down payment, especially for younger collectors who never imagined that a single quarter could move the needle on their financial life in such a tangible way. The progression continues to climb with even more remarkable outcomes, as unusual mint anomalies such as significant double die varieties, off-center strikes, or wrong planchet errors have documented results in the neighborhood of $6,000, while particularly desirable collector pieces with exceptional visual appeal, pristine surfaces, and strong provenance have crossed the $7,500 threshold in heated bidding wars between determined specialists. Exceptionally preserved or uncommon coins, including those with full strike characteristics, unbroken original luster, and populations of just a handful of known examples at the very highest certified grades, have reached approximately $8,000, and unusual finds with strong collector demand, such as newly discovered major varieties that send ripples through the numismatic community, have achieved around $8,500 in recent years as awareness and competition continue to grow. At the absolute pinnacle, extraordinary or historically significant examples, perhaps tied to a famous collection, a groundbreaking discovery, or an error type so rare that only one or two are known to exist, have approached, and in some cases reached $9,000, a figure that for many people represents a once-in-a-lifetime discovery capable of transforming an ordinary day into the most memorable moment of their collecting life. And a reminder that the world of coins still holds secrets waiting to be uncovered by anyone willing to look closely enough. Before you ever consider buying or selling a 1985 Washington quarter at any of these value levels, you must take several critical steps to protect yourself and ensure that what you are holding is authentic, properly attributed, and accurately graded, because the financial stakes are simply too high to rely on guesswork or unverified claims. Examine the weight carefully on a calibrated digital scale. Confirm that it reads 5.67 grams within a very tight tolerance. Inspect the metal composition and color for consistency with a genuine clad quarter. Check the strike alignment between obverse and reverse. Evaluate the rim shape for uniformity and completeness. And scrutinize every letter on both sides of the coin under magnification for any signs of doubling, repunching, or die deterioration that could identify a valuable variety. Most importantly, submit any coin you believe to be significant to a professional authentication and grading service such as PCGS or NGC, because their encapsulation and certification provide the market confidence and buyer protection that make high-value transactions possible. And without that third-party verification, even the most extraordinary 1985 quarter may struggle to command the prices it truly deserves. And with that, we leave the 1985 Washington quarter behind and turn our attention to another coin, one whose story is even more shrouded in mystery, whose rarity is even more fiercely debated, and whose discovery in an old estate collection just last year sent shockwaves through the numismatic world that are still reverberating today, a coin that you will not want to miss. Second coin. The United States 1978 Washington quarter dollar coin arrives in your hand looking like the most unremarkable piece of pocket change you could ever encounter. Its surfaces worn smooth from decades of circulation, its silver-white clad complexion dulled to a flat gray that betrays nothing of the remarkable story concealed within its modest dimensions. Struck during the final full year before the Susan B. Anthony dollar's introduction, would disrupt mint operations and redirect resources across multiple facilities. This coin emerged from a production environment under immense pressure to supply an economy hungry for circulating coinage, and the vast majority of 1978 quarters were produced in staggering quantities that virtually guaranteed their ordinariness for generations to come. Yet buried within that ocean of common strikes, a handful of coins carry secrets from the mint floor that remained hidden for decades, quietly passing from register to drawer to piggy bank without anyone ever suspecting that one of the most compelling numismatic mysteries of the late 20th century was sitting in plain sight, disguised as something utterly forgettable. The historical backdrop of 1978 adds a layer of quiet intrigue to this coin that most collectors overlook, because it was a year of transition and turbulence within the United States mint system, with aging equipment at multiple facilities, shifting personnel, and experimental adjustments to die preparation processes that occasionally produced results far outside the intended specifications. The Philadelphia Mint, which struck the majority of 1978 quarters without a mint mark, as was customary for circulating coinage from that facility during this era, was operating at near maximum capacity, and the Denver Mint contributed its own enormous output with the D mint mark prominently displayed on the obverse. What few people realized at the time, and what has only gradually come to light through decades of careful study by variety researchers and error specialists, is that the intense production demands of this period created conditions in which dies were pushed beyond their normal lifespan. Planchets were sometimes improperly fed into the coining chamber, and a small but meaningful number of coins emerged bearing characteristics that would one day transform them from ordinary spending money into objects of intense desire and fierce competition among collectors who have spent years searching for them. Visually, a well-preserved 1978 Washington quarter displays Flanagan's classic portrait with Washington's leftward gaze beneath the word Liberty and the motto "In God We Trust" arching above, while the reverse features the heraldic eagle with spread wings perched on a bundle of arrows framed by twin olive branches, all rendered in the cupronickel-clad composition that gives the coin its characteristic pale silver tone. The weight should measure precisely 5.67 grams, the diameter 24.3 millimeters, and the edge should carry the reeded texture that distinguishes the quarter from its smaller sibling denominations. But collectors who have spent time with this issue know that these baseline specifications only tell part of the story. Because the most fascinating examples deviate from these standards in ways that reveal the chaotic and fascinating reality of how coins were actually produced during this frenetic period at the end of the 1970s. A genuine high-grade specimen should exhibit strong cartwheel luster when rotated under light, with devices that rise sharply from the fields and lettering that appears crisp and fully formed. But finding such a coin is far more difficult than most people imagine, because the vast majority of surviving 1978 quarters were released into commerce and suffered decades of wear, abrasion, and environmental damage that erased the very qualities collectors now prize most. The era landscape surrounding the 1978 Washington quarter is where this coin's story shifts from quietly interesting to genuinely astonishing, because researchers have identified several distinct categories of mint errors and varieties that occurred during this production year, each with its own origin story rooted in the specific challenges the mint faced during this period. Among the most significant are instances of letter doubling visible on the obverse inscriptions, particularly in the motto and date, where the working die received multiple impressions from the master hub with slight misalignment between them, creating a split or shadowed appearance on the serifs that is detectable only under magnification, but unmistakable once identified. Other documented anomalies include coins struck on off-center planchets where the design is shifted and a portion of the blank flan extends beyond the struck area, broad strike examples where the retaining collar failed and the coin expanded beyond its intended diameter, and instances where the coin was struck on a planchet intended for a different denomination entirely, producing a quarter design on a smaller or larger blank that represents one of the most visually striking and collectible error types in all of American numismatics. The emotional heart of the 1978 quarter's appeal lies in the stories of missed opportunities and life-changing discoveries that have become woven into the fabric of this coin's collector culture over the decades. Stories of individuals who possessed a genuinely rare error example without ever recognizing what they had, who spent it at a convenience store or gave it to a child as a curiosity, only to learn years later that the coin they casually let go was worth more than their car, or in some cases more than their annual salary. There is a particular poignancy to these narratives because the 1978 quarter does not announce its rarity the way a silver dollar or a gold coin might. It carries no intrinsic precious metal value. It bears no design that screams special or limited. And so its treasures have been lost again and again by people who had no reason to look closely and no framework for understanding that the most valuable thing in their pocket might be hiding behind the most familiar face in American coinage. For every collector who has found a remarkable 1978 error in a bank roll or an inherited collection, there are dozens more who unknowingly let one slip away. And that combination of discovery and loss gives this coin a narrative weight that pure statistics could never convey. When the discussion turns to market value, the 1978 Washington quarter reveals a range that would astonish anyone who has ever casually handled one. And the figures that follow reflect documented auction or private sale results where applicable, though they are never guaranteed, and the market for rare error coins remains as unpredictable as it is passionate. Notable examples with above-average eye appeal, strong strike characteristics, and minor but identifiable varieties have recorded outcomes between $5,000 and $7,000 in specialized numismatic transactions, sums that already represent a staggering return on a coin originally valued at 25 cents, and that could mean the difference between struggling through a difficult financial month and breathing freely for the first time in years. Higher-grade error coins, particularly those with clear and dramatic doubling or well-centered off-center strikes that display the date and mint mark fully, have reached approximately $8,000 in competitive bidding environments, a figure that for many families equals several months of mortgage payments, and transforms a single small coin into something capable of altering the trajectory of a person's financial life in ways they never anticipated. The progression continues to climb into territory that feels almost surreal for a circulating clad quarter, as strong mint-state coins with exceptional surface preservation, unbroken original luster, and populations confirmed by major grading services at the highest certified levels have achieved around $8,200 in recent sales. While unusual mint mistakes such as wrong planchet errors or multiple struck examples showing dramatic visual evidence of the production failure have documented results near $8,700, figures that place these coins firmly in the category of serious investment-grade numismatic material rather than casual collectibles. Major error coins, including those with combinations of errors such as an off-center strike on a wrong planchet or a broad strike with visible die clash marks, have crossed the $9,000 threshold in heated auction battles, where determined specialists recognized that the specimen represented something not just rare but potentially unique, a one-of-a-kind artifact from a specific moment in mint history that could never be replicated. And at the absolute summit of the market for this issue, exceptionally rare documented error examples, coins whose stories have been traced through specific auction records, whose provenance connects them to famous collections, and whose combination of error type, grade, and visual impact places them in a category of perhaps one or two known specimens, have reached up to $35,000, a sum that, for most people, represents a life-changing discovery. A financial windfall capable of funding a college education, covering a year of medical expenses, or providing the down payment on a home, all hidden inside a coin that looks on first glance like something you might use to pay a parking meter. Before any transaction involving a potentially significant 1978 Washington quarter, responsible examination is essential at every step, beginning with a careful check of the weight on a properly calibrated scale to confirm the 5.67 gram standard, followed by inspection of the metal composition and color for consistency with a genuine cupronickel-clad coin. Since counterfeits and altered pieces have become increasingly sophisticated, and the financial stakes are far too high to rely on visual impression alone, Examine the strike alignment between obverse and reverse for any rotational deviation. Evaluate the rim for evidence of expansion beyond normal diameter that might indicate a broad strike error. And scrutinize every letter under magnification for doubling, repunching, or other die anomalies that could identify a rare and valuable variety. Because the difference between a common coin worth face value and a rare error worth thousands can come down to details visible only at 5 to 10 times magnification. Most critically, submit any coin you believe to be significant to a professional authentication and grading service such as PCGS or NGC before considering any sale or purchase, because their expert analysis, certification, and encapsulation provide the verification and protection that the market demands at these value levels. And without that independent third-party confirmation, even the most remarkable 1978 quarter may never reach its true potential. And with that, we close the chapter on the 1978 Washington quarter. But the story is far from over, because waiting in the shadows of numismatic history is another coin, struck in a year that most collectors have completely overlooked, carrying an error so subtle and so devastatingly rare that only a handful of people on Earth know it exists. And its discovery in a forgotten cigar box in rural Vermont, just 2 years ago, set in motion a chain of events that has left the entire collecting community stunned and searching for answers that may never fully come to light. Coin number 3. The United States 1989 P Mintmark Washington $quarter coin enters the world with a deceptive quietness. A modest piece of cupronickel-clad coinage that looks virtually identical to the billions of quarters minted across the previous decade, yet carries within its small circular frame a story of production anomalies, collector obsession, and hidden value that has slowly emerged over more than 3 decades of patient numismatic investigation. Struck at the Philadelphia Mint during the final year of the 1980s, a period when American coinage was undergoing subtle but meaningful transitions in die preparation, hubbing technology, and quality assurance protocols. This coin represents a fascinating intersection between mass production efficiency and the unpredictable human and mechanical errors that occasionally disrupt even the most carefully calibrated systems. The P Mintmark, positioned discreetly to the right of Washington's hair tie on the obverse, identifies this coin as a product of Philadelphia. And while that mintmark alone does not confer rarity, it anchors this specific issue within a production context that has proven unusually fertile ground for the kinds of mistakes and variations that transform ordinary circulating coins into objects of intense and sometimes irrational collector desire. A reality that very few people who have ever held this coin could have imagined. The late 1980s marked a pivotal moment in the history of United States coin production, because the mint was beginning to phase in new hub designs and experiment with modified die creation techniques that would eventually culminate in the major design changes of the early 1990s. And the 1989 P quarter sits directly on the fault line of that transition, making it a coin produced during a window of technical uncertainty, where old and new processes sometimes collided in ways that produced unexpected results. The Philadelphia facility was operating under enormous volume demands to supply coins for a booming retail economy, and the presses were running at speeds that left little room for the kind of meticulous inspection that earlier, lower volume eras had allowed, which meant that dies were frequently used well beyond their optimal lifespan. Planchets were occasionally fed into the coining chamber with imperfections or misalignments, and a small but persistent stream of coins emerged from the presses bearing characteristics that deviated from the mint's own specifications in ways that ranged from barely perceptible to dramatically obvious, though virtually none of these deviations were recognized or cataloged at the time of their release into circulation. When you hold a genuine 1989 P Washington quarter in uncirculated condition, the visual experience should be one of crisp, luminous precision, with Flanagan's Washington portrait rising cleanly from fields that display unbroken cartwheel luster under rotation, the eagle on the reverse perched with defined feather texture and a sharply rendered wreath, and the lettering around both sides showing the kind of full, rounded edges that indicate a strong strike from fresh dyes on a properly prepared planchet. The clad layer should present a consistent silvery white tone, with the faintest warm undertone from the copper core visible only at the edge. The reeded rim should be uniform and complete with no clipped sections or irregular expansion, and the coin should weigh precisely 5.67 grams on a calibrated instrument, because any significant deviation from that standard immediately raises questions about authenticity, planchet composition, or the possibility that the coin was struck on a blank intended for a different denomination, all of which are scenarios that have been documented in the 1989 P production run, and that carry enormous implications for value. The strike alignment between obverse and reverse should be examined carefully, because rotational misalignments, while uncommon, have been recorded for this issue, and can indicate a striking error that elevates the coin from ordinary circulation piece to significant numismatic specimen worthy of professional evaluation and certification. The error and variety landscape of the 1989 P quarter is particularly rich and has been the subject of growing collector attention over the past 15 years, as researchers using modern high-resolution imaging and dye study techniques have identified several distinct categories of anomalies that went completely unnoticed when these coins were first released into commerce. And each category carries its own origin story, rooted in the specific conditions of the Philadelphia Mint during this transitional production year. Among the most carefully studied are instances of letter doubling on the obverse, where close examination of the serifs on "In God We Trust," Liberty, and the date reveals a split or shadowed appearance caused by slight shifting between multiple hub impressions during die creation, a phenomenon that can be difficult to distinguish from mechanical doubling or die deterioration, doubling without expert analysis, but that represents a genuine doubled die variety when properly identified. Other documented errors include off-center strikes where the design is visibly shifted from center, coins struck on clipped planchets where a portion of the blank was missing before the strike, and instances of die cracks that propagated across the face of the coin during extended die use, creating raised lines of metal that serve as a fingerprint of that specific die's history, and that some collectors find deeply appealing for their direct connection to the physical reality of the minting process. The emotional dimension of collecting the 1989 P quarter is built on a foundation of overlooked opportunity and the haunting awareness that thousands of genuinely rare and valuable examples of this coin were handled, spent, and ultimately lost during the years before collectors recognized the significance of the errors and varieties that this issue harbored, a reality that adds a layer of melancholy and urgency to every search conducted through bank rolls, estate collections, and old accumulations of saved change. There is a particular kind of heartbreak that experienced collectors describe when recounting the stories of 1989 P quarters that passed through their hands before they knew what to look for, coins that showed subtle doubling or unusual strike characteristics that were dismissed as insignificant at the time, but that later, once the research community had mapped the error landscape of this issue more completely, were recognized as specimens that could have been worth extraordinary sums if only they had been recognized, preserved, and submitted for authentication before they were lost back into the endless current of everyday commerce. That tension between what was missed and what might still be found is the engine that drives the most dedicated variety hunters, individuals who spend hundreds of hours examining thousands of 1989 P quarters under magnification, searching for that one coin that everyone else overlooked, that one specimen carrying an error so subtle or so rare that it has eluded detection for over 3 decades, but that could, once identified, change the trajectory of a collector's life in an instant. The value progression for significant 1989 P Washington quarters follows a dramatic upward arc that would stun anyone who has ever casually dropped one into a vending machine. And the figures discussed here represent documented auction or collector sales where applicable, though they are never guaranteed, and the market for rare modern-era coins fluctuates based on demand, population reports, and the ongoing discovery of new specimens that can shift the perceived rarity of any given variety. Smaller errors, including minor double die varieties, modest off-center strikes, and examples with attractive but not dramatic die cracks, have recorded outcomes between $3,000 and $6,000 in specialized transactions. Amounts that already represent an extraordinary return on a coin originally worth 25 cents, and that could mean the difference between a family struggling to cover unexpected medical bills and finding sudden financial breathing room they never anticipated. Unusual discoveries, such as previously uncatalogued varieties or examples with combinations of minor errors that create a distinctive and appealing visual character, have reached approximately $6,500 in competitive bidding, while premium high-grade examples certified at the very top of the mint state scale by major grading services, with populations of only a handful of known specimens, have achieved around $7,000. Figures that transform a single small coin into something capable of covering months of living expenses or funding a long-deferred dream. As the market climbs further, the figures enter territory that feels almost impossible to reconcile with the coin's humble appearance and origin, because significant error coins such as well-centered off-center strikes displaying the full date and mint mark, or examples with clear and dramatic double die obverses that have been formally listed in major variety registries, have crossed the $8,000 mark in heated auction battles. While exceptional mint state errors combining pristine surface preservation with visually striking error characteristics have documented results near $8,600, placing them firmly in the category of investment-grade numismatic material that attracts serious collectors and institutional buyers rather than casual hobbyists. Rare misstrikes, including coins struck on planchets intended for other denominations, multiple struck examples showing two or more overlapping impressions, and broad strike errors where the coin expanded dramatically beyond its intended diameter due to collar failure, have reached approximately $9,000 in recent years, as awareness of the 1989 P error landscape has grown and competition among specialists has intensified. And at the absolute pinnacle, extraordinary documented examples with impeccable provenance, potentially unique error combinations, and certification from the most respected grading services have achieved up to $11,000, a sum that, for most people, represents a genuine life-changing discovery, the kind of financial windfall that could pay off a significant portion of debt, fund a child's education, or provide the foundation for a completely new chapter of life. All concealed within a coin that most Americans would not pause to examine for even a single second. The path to responsibly identifying and evaluating a potentially valuable 1989 P quarter requires discipline, patience, and a willingness to subject every candidate coin to a systematic examination process that begins with verifying the weight at 5.67 grams on a calibrated digital scale. Since any meaningful deviation immediately signals the possibility of a wrong planchet error or a counterfeit that must be investigated further before any conclusion is drawn. The metal composition and color should be evaluated for consistency with a genuine cupronickel-clad quarter. The strike quality should be assessed for sharpness and completeness across all design elements. The rim should be inspected for uniformity, expansion, or evidence of a broad strike or clipped planchet. And every letter on both obverse and reverse must be examined under 5 to 10 times magnification for any trace of doubling, repunching, or die deterioration that could identify a variety of genuine significance and value. Above all, any coin that you believe carries a meaningful error or variety should be submitted to a professional authentication and grading service such as PCGS or NGC before any sale or purchase is contemplated. Because the financial stakes at these value levels demand the kind of expert verification, population documentation, and protective encapsulation that only a recognized third-party service can provide. And without that certification, even the most remarkable 1989 P quarter may never realize the full measure of its worth in the marketplace. And with that, we turn away from the 1989 P quarter and toward a coin whose story is even more improbable, whose rarity is even more fiercely contested, and whose emergence from a forgotten bank vault in the American Midwest just 18 months ago triggered a bidding war so intense that 3 of the most experienced numismatists in the country reportedly stopped speaking to one another over the outcome, a coin whose full story has never been told publicly until now. Last coin. The United States 1983 Washington quarter dollar coin drifts through American commerce with all the visual drama of a cloudy afternoon, its surfaces carrying the familiar silver-white pallor of cupronickel-clad composition, its reeded edge indistinguishable from any other quarter that has jingled in pockets and registers across the nation for nearly 4 decades. Yet beneath that deliberately unremarkable exterior lies one of the most quietly astonishing chapters in modern American numismatics. Struck during a year when the United States Mint was grappling with the economic pressures of a lingering recession, reduced production volumes at both the Philadelphia and Denver facilities, and a growing debate within Treasury Department corridors about the future composition and cost of American coinage, this specific issue emerged from a production environment characterized by uncertainty, experimentation, and occasional lapses in the quality control systems that normally ensured every coin leaving the presses met precise federal specifications. The Philadelphia Mint produced 1983 quarters without a mint mark, as was standard practice for that era, while Denver's output carried the D mint mark on the obverse, and both facilities contributed to a total mintage that was significantly lower than the surrounding years, a fact that has gained increasing importance among collectors who recognize that lower mintage figures, combined with the harsh realities of circulation survival, create a mathematical scarcity that becomes more pronounced with every passing year as attrition quietly removes specimens from the surviving population. The production context of 1983 is essential to understanding why this particular coin has become a focal point for error specialists and variety researchers, because the Mint's budget constraints during this period led to extended die usage, deferred equipment maintenance, and a general atmosphere of doing more with less that inevitably produced consequences on the coining floor, consequences that were not always caught before the affected coins were released into the monetary supply. Dies were pushed to their limits and beyond, accumulating stress fractures, developing fatigue-related deformation in the lettering and design elements, and occasionally producing strikes that deviated from intended specifications in ways both subtle and dramatic, while planchet preparation inconsistencies meant that some blanks entered the coining chamber with improper thickness, incorrect alloy distribution, or surface contamination that affected the final appearance and durability of the struck coin. The result was a small but meaningful population of 1983 quarters that carry visible evidence of the production challenges that defined their birth, evidence that went unrecognized and uncatalogued for years, until a new generation of numismatic researchers began systematically studying the error and variety landscape of modern clad coinage, with tools and techniques that earlier collectors simply did not possess. A genuine 1983 Washington quarter in pristine, uncirculated condition presents a visual study in restrained elegance, with Washington's leftward-facing portrait rendered in sharp relief against fields that should radiate unbroken cartwheel luster when the coin is rotated beneath a light source. The reverse, eagle displaying full feather definition along the wing tips and breast, and the surrounding inscriptions showing clean, well-formed lettering with no evidence of the softness or indistinctness that characterizes coins struck from worn or damaged dies. The weight should register at exactly 5.67 grams, the diameter at 24.3 millimeters, and the reeded edge should display consistent spacing and depth around the entire circumference, because deviations in any of these baseline parameters can signal the presence of a planchet error, a striking anomaly, or in some cases, a counterfeit produced to deceive unsuspecting buyers in a market where genuine rare examples command prices that make deception financially worthwhile. The color should be a uniform silvery white with the barest hint of warmth from the copper core, visible only at the edge where the clad layers meet, and any discoloration, spotting, or tunning should be evaluated carefully to determine whether it represents natural environmental aging or evidence of improper cleaning, storage, or chemical exposure that could affect both authenticity assessment and market value. The error categories documented for the 1983 Washington quarter are as diverse as they are fascinating, ranging from the barely perceptible to the unmistakably dramatic, and each carries its own narrative about what went wrong on the mint floor during that economically constrained production year. Letter doubling has been identified on multiple obverse inscriptions, with researchers cataloging distinct varieties showing split serifs on Liberty, the motto "In God We Trust," and the date digits, where the working die received multiple hub impressions with fractional misalignment between them, creating a ghost image that is invisible to the naked eye but unmistakable under 5 to 10 times magnification. Beyond doubling, collectors have documented off-center strikes where the planchet was improperly seated between the dies and the design appears shifted with a crescent of blank metal visible, broad strike errors, where the retaining collar failed and the coin expanded beyond its standard diameter. Coins struck on clipped or incomplete planchets that show missing portions of the rim and edge, and even rare instances of coins struck on planchets intended for foreign governments or other denominations, which represent some of the most visually arresting and commercially valuable error types in the entire Washington quarter series. The emotional resonance of the 1983 quarter story comes alive when you consider the countless individuals who have possessed a genuinely rare and valuable example of this coin, without ever knowing what they held. People who received one as change at a gas station, found one in a laundry room coin tray, or inherited a small jar of saved quarters from a deceased relative, and never thought to examine any of them closely, because quarters are supposed to be the most ordinary things in the world. There is a deep and specific ache that collectors describe when they recount the 1983 quarters they once handled casually before they understood the error landscape of this issue. Coins that showed unusual strike characteristics or visible doubling that was dismissed as a smudge or a trick of the light. Coins that were spent on a cup of coffee or dropped into a toll basket, and that would later be recognized as specimens worth more than the car that carried them to the toll booth. That intersection of ordinary appearance and extraordinary potential is what makes this coin so emotionally charged for the collecting community. Because every unsearched roll of quarters, every inherited accumulation, every jar of loose change sitting on a bedroom shelf represents a chance that something remarkable might still be hiding there, unrecognized and unclaimed, waiting for the one person who knows what to look for to finally see what everyone else has missed. The value structure for significant 1983 Washington quarters reveals a range that would leave most people genuinely stunned, and the figures that follow represent documented auction or private sale results where applicable, though they are never guaranteed, and the market for rare modern era coins responds to factors including population reports, condition census tracking, collector demand cycles, and the ongoing discovery of new specimens that can reshape the perceived rarity of any given variety. Minor errors, including modest double die varieties, light die cracks, and examples with slight but identifiable planchet imperfections, have recorded outcomes between $900 and $2,000 in specialized numismatic transactions, sums that already represent a remarkable return on a coin originally valued at 25 cents, and that could provide unexpected relief for a family navigating a difficult financial stretch. Unusual misstrikes, such as partially off-center examples or coins with visible collar errors, have reached approximately $3,000 in competitive bidding, while premium high-grade examples certified at the uppermost tiers of the mint state scale by major grading services, with populations confirmed at just a small number of known specimens, have achieved around $3,500. Figures that begin to feel less like coin prices and more like meaningful contributions toward long-deferred personal goals or unexpected obligations that have weighed on a household for months. The progression continues into increasingly rarefied territory as strong mint state era coins, combining pristine surface preservation with clearly visible and well-documented error characteristics, have crossed the $5,000 threshold in auction settings, where determined specialists recognized that the specimen represented something genuinely scarce within the 1983 production population. Rare misstrikes, including dramatically off-center examples that display the full date and mint information alongside a large area of unstruck planchet, or coins showing multiple strikes from separate die engagements, have documented results near $6,000, while extraordinary collector examples, perhaps tied to a famous discovery story or a particularly visually compelling combination of error elements, have reached approximately $6,500 in recent years as the collector base for modern error coinage has expanded and competition for the finest known specimens has intensified. At the summit of the market for this issue, exceptional or one-of-a-kind documented discoveries, coins whose error type may be represented by only a single known specimen, whose provenance can be traced through specific auction records and famous collections, and whose certification by the most respected grading services confirms their status as genuinely unique artifacts of American minting history, have achieved up to $9,000. A figure that for most people represents a life-changing discovery capable of eliminating debt, funding a major life transition, or simply providing the kind of financial security that most Americans spend decades working toward, all concealed within a coin that looks on first inspection like something you might use to pay a parking meter without a second thought. The responsibility of properly evaluating a potentially significant 1983 Washington quarter falls on anyone who suspects they may have found something unusual, and the process demands careful attention to every measurable attribute of the coin, beginning with a weight check on a calibrated digital scale to confirm the 5.67 gram standard, since meaningful deviation immediately raises the possibility of a wrong planchet error or an altered specimen that requires further investigation before any conclusion is reached. The metal composition and color should be evaluated for consistency with a genuine cupronickel-clad quarter. The strike alignment between obverse and reverse should be checked for any rotational deviation. The rim should be inspected for evidence of expansion, clipping, or collar failure, and every letter on both sides of the coin must be examined under magnification for any trace of doubling, repunching, or die deterioration that could identify a variety of genuine collector significance. Most importantly, any coin you believe to be rare or valuable should be submitted to a professional authentication and grading service such as PCGS or NGC before any sale or purchase is contemplated, because the financial stakes at these value levels demand independent third-party verification that provides market confidence and buyer protection. And without that certification, even the most extraordinary 1983 quarter may never command the price it truly deserves. So before you go, take one more look at that jar of change on your shelf At those rolls of quarters you picked up from the bank months ago and never searched, at the handful of coins sitting in your car's cup holder. Because the stories you have heard today prove beyond any doubt that genuinely life-changing treasures are still hiding in everyday pocket change, waiting for someone with the knowledge and the patience to find them. And if you want to make sure you never miss the next remarkable discovery, hit that subscribe button right now so you are here for every episode as we continue uncovering the most extraordinary secrets hidden in plain sight across the entire landscape of American coinage. And that is a wrap on today's video. So thank you for watching. Keep searching, keep learning, and we will see you next time.